We're on day 51 of our Bible in a Year series. Still in Numbers. We have today and tomorrow. Today, though, we're getting to see the conclusion of Balaam. What happened there? His story, last we saw, it kind of seemed like it just dropped off to nowhere. We didn't really see a conclusion there, but we will today. So I know everyone is just waiting on bated breath, and it's not like you can read ahead and see what happens. So everyone's waiting. So we'll get into it in Numbers 31. So remember, we saw before the the I don't remember his name. King of Midian had brought Balaam in to try to curse Israel, and he couldn't do it. He tried and tried and tried. He tried to sway God to get him to allow Balaam to curse Israel, and God wasn't having it. So we are in Numbers 31. The Lord spoke to Moses, execute vengeance for the Israelites against the Midianites. After that, you will be gathered to your people. And this is talking similarly to what we saw with Aaron. So Moses spoke to the people, equip some of your men for war. They will go against Midian to inflict the Lord's vengeance on them. Send 1,000 men to war from each Israelite tribe. So 1,000 were recruited from each Israelite tribe. Out of the thousands in Israel, 12,000 equipped for war. Moses sent 1,000 from each tribe to war. They went with Phinehas. They went with Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, in whose care were the holy objects and signal trumpets. They waged war against Midian as the Lord had commanded. They waged war against Midian as the Lord had commanded and killed every male. Along with the others slain by them, they killed the Midianite kings Evi, Rechem, Zer, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. The Israelites took the Midianite women and their dependents captive, and they plundered all their cattle, flocks, and property. So there's Balaam. Then they burned all the cities where the Midianites lived, as well as all their encampments, and took away all the spoils of war and the captives, both people and animals. They brought the prisoners, animals, and spoils of war to Moses, the priest Eleazar, and the Israelite community at the camp on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. Moses, the priest Eleazar, and all the leaders of the community went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses became furious with the officers, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds who were returning from the military campaign. Have you let every female live? He asked them, yet they are the ones who, at Balaam's advice, incited the Israelites to unfaithfulness against the Lord in the Peor incident, so that the plague came against the Lord's community. Remember that? This is Moses is saying that Balaam is the one that told them to do it. So, verse 17. So now kill every male among the dependents and kill every woman who has gone to bed with a man. But keep alive for yourselves all the young females who have not gone to bed with a man. You are to remain outside the camp for 7 days. All of you and your prisoners have killed a person or touched the dead are to purify yourselves on the 3rd day and the 7th day. So why here is Moses telling them not to kill the females that have not gone to bed with the man? I have heard, and again, I've not studied numbers super deeply, but an explanation that I've heard is that these are women who have not, if they know that they had not gone to bed with a man, they know that they are not ones that had attempted or that had been used previously to lure Israel into idol worship. So it's not really specifically about that they haven't been with a man. It's about the idea that they haven't lured Israelite men into worshiping idols. Verse 20. Also purify everything: garments, leather goods, things made of goat hair, and every article of wood. Then the priest Eleazar said to the soldiers who had gone to battle, "This is the legal statute the Lord commanded Moses: gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, and lead. Everything that can withstand fire, you are to pass through fire, and it will be clean. It must still be purified with purification water. Anything that cannot withstand fire, pass through the water. On the seventh day, wash your clothes, and you will be clean. After that, you may enter camp." Verse 25. The Lord told Moses, "You, the priest Eleazar, and the family heads of the community are to take account of what was captured, people and animals, and divide the captives between the troops who went out to war with the entire community. Set aside a tribute for the Lord from what belongs to the fighting men who went out to war. One out of every 500 people, cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. Take the tribute from their half and give it to the priest Eleazar as a contribution to the Lord. From the Israelites' half, take one out of every 50 from the people, cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats, all the livestock, and give them to the Levites who perform the duties of the Lord's tabernacle." So Moses, the priest Eleazar, Moses and the priest Eleazar did as the Lord commanded Moses. The captives remaining from the plunder the army had taken totaled 675,000 sheep and goats, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 people, all the females who had not gone to bed with a man. The half portion for those who went out to war numbered 337,500 sheep and goats, and the tribute to the Lord was 675 from the sheep and goats. From the 36,000 cattle, the tribute to the Lord was 72. From the 30,500 donkeys, the tribute to the Lord was 61. And from the 16,000 people, the tribute to the Lord was 32. Moses gave the tribute to the priest Eleazar as a contribution for the Lord, as the Lord had commanded Moses. From the Israelites' half, which Moses separated from the men who fought, the community's half was 337,500 sheep and goats, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. Moses took one out of every 50 selected from the people and the livestock, and the Israelites' half. He gave them to the Levites who performed their duties of the Lord's tabernacle, and the Lord had commanded him, as the Lord had commanded him. The officers who were over the thousands of the army, the commanders of the thousands and of the hundreds, approached Moses and told him, "Your servants have taken a census of the fighting men under our command, and not one of us is missing. So we have presented the Lord an offering of the gold articles each man found, armlets, bracelets, rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord." Moses and the priest Eleazar received from them the articles made out of gold. All of the gold of the contribution they offered to the Lord from the commanders of the thousands and of the hundreds was 420 pounds. Each of the soldiers had taken plunder for himself. Moses and the priest Eleazar received the gold from the commanders of the thousands and of the hundreds and brought it into the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord. Okay, before we get to verse 32, one thing that really stuck out to me, I thought was really cool, I guess, for lack of a better term, to see, is that they recognized the after they did the census, the gratitude that they had for God brought them out of it. And so they were not told to go give this offering, the gold. They decided to do it, which I think is an awesome thing to see. Little sidebar, I guess. Chapter 32. The Reubenites and the Gadites had a very large number of livestock. When they surveyed the lands of Jezer and Gilead, they saw that the region was a good one for livestock. So the Gadites and Reubenites came to Moses, the priest Eleazar, and the leaders of the community, and said, "The territory of Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eliela, Sibam, Nebu, and Beon, which the Lord struck down before the community of Israel, is good land for livestock, and your servants own livestock." They said, "If we have found favor with you, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Don't make us cross the Jordan." But Moses asked the Gadites and Reubenites, "Should your brothers go to war while you stay here? Why are you discouraging the Israelites from crossing into the land the Lord has given them? That's what your ancestors did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. After they went up as far as Eshcol Valley and saw the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land the Lord had given them. So the Lord's anger burned that day, and he swore an oath. Because they did not remain loyal to me, none of the men 20 years old or more who came up from Egypt will see the land I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. None except Caleb, son of Jubinah the Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, because they did remain loyal to the Lord. Falling right back into it, right? Uh, Obviously, this has been a while because these are all the people that are going into this are all people that were 20 or under before. Um, Anyone that was over 20 has died off or will die off before they actually go into the promised land. But we're seeing the same thing start to replay. And Moses is telling them, "Hey, don't do this. Like this is a bad idea. Let's not do this." Verse 13. The Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until the whole generation that had done what was evil in the Lord's sight was gone. And here you, a brood of sinners, stand in your ancestors' place, adding even more to the Lord's burning anger against Israel. If you turn back from following him, he will once again leave this people in the wilderness, and you will destroy all of them. Then they approached him and said, "We want to build sheep pens here for our livestock and cities for our dependents, but we will arm ourselves and be ready to go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them into their place. Meanwhile, our dependents will remain in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites has taken possession of his inheritance. Yet we will not have an inheritance with them across the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance will be across the Jordan to the east." Moses replied to them, "If you do this, if you arm yourselves for battle before the Lord, and every one of your armed men crosses the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven his enemies from his presence, and the land is subdued before the Lord. Afterward, you may return and be free from obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land will belong to you as a possession before the Lord. But if you don't do this, you will certainly sin against the Lord. Be sure your sin will catch up with you. Build cities for your dependents and pens for your flocks, but do what you have promised." The Gadites and Reubenites answered Moses, "Your servants will do just as the Lord commands. Our dependents' wives, livestock, and all our animals will remain here in the cities of Gilead, but your servants are equipped for war before the Lord and will go across to the battle as my Lord orders." So Moses gave orders about them to the priest Eleazar, Joshua son of Nun, and the family heads of the Israelite tribes. Moses told them, "If the Gadites and Reubenites cross the Jordan with you, every man in battle formation before the Lord, and the land is subdued before you, you are to give them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they don't go across with you in battle formation, they must accept land in Canaan with you." The Gadites and Reubenites replied, "What the Lord has spoken to your servants is what we will do. We will cross over in battle formation before the Lord in the land of Canaan, but we will keep our hereditary possession across the Jordan." So Moses gave them the Gadites, Reubenites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the kingdom of King Sihon of the Amorites, and the kingdom of King Og of Bashan, the land including its cities, with its territories surrounding them. The Gadites rebuilt Dibon, Ataroth, Aror, Atroth, Shopin, Jazer, Jogbehah, Nimrah, and Beth Haran, as fortified cities and built sheep pens. The Reubenites rebuilt Heshbon, Elilah, Kirithaim, as well as Nebo and Baal Meon, whose names were changed, and Sibmah. They gave names to the cities they rebuilt. The descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, went to Gilead, captured it, drove out the Amorites who were there. So Moses gave Gilead to the clan of Machir, son of Manasseh, and settled in it. Jair, the descendant of Manasseh, went and captured their villages, which he renamed Jair's village. Nobal went and captured Kenath with its surrounding villages and called it Nobah after his own name. Okay, Numbers 33. These were the stages of the Israelites' journey when they were out of the land of Egypt by their military divisions under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. In the Lord's command, Moses wrote down the starting points for the stages of their journey. These are the stages listed by their starting points. They traveled from Ramses in the first month on the 15th day of the month. On the day after the Passover, the Israelites went out defiantly in the sight of all the Egyptians. Meanwhile, the Egyptians were burying every firstborn male the Lord had struck down among them, for the Lord had executed judgment against their gods. The Israelites traveled from Ramesses and camped at Succoth. They traveled from Succoth and camped at Etham, which is on the edge of the wilderness. They traveled from Etham and turned back to Pi Hahiroth, which faces Baal Zephon, and they camped before Migdol. They traveled from Pi Hahiroth and crossed through the middle of the sea into the wilderness. They took a 3-day journey into the wilderness of Etham and camped at Marah. They traveled from Marah and came to Elim. There were 12 springs and 70 date palms at Elim, so they camped there. Elim and camped by the Red Sea. They traveled from the Red Sea and camped in the wilderness of Sin. That ironic. They traveled from the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dopka. They traveled from Dopka and camped at Alush. They traveled from Alush and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. They traveled from Rephidim and camped in the wilderness of Sinai. They traveled from the wilderness of Sinai and camped in Kibroth Hattava. They traveled from Kibroth Hattava and camped at Hazeroth. They traveled from Hazeroth and camped at Rithmah. They traveled from Rithmah and camped at Ramon Perez. They traveled from Ramon Perez and camped at Libnah. They traveled from Libnah and camped at Rissa. They traveled from Rissa and camped at Kahalatha. They traveled from Kahalatha and camped at Mount Sheper. They traveled from Mount Sheper and camped at Haradah. They traveled from Haradah and camped at Machelioth. They traveled from Machelioth and camped at Tahath. Tahath. They traveled from Tahath and camped at Terah. They traveled from Terah and camped at Mithka. They traveled from Mithka and camped at Hashmonah. They traveled from Hashmonah and camped at Moseroth. They traveled from Moseroth and camped at Bein Jakan. They traveled from Bein Jakan and camped at Hor Haggidgad. They traveled from Hor Haggidgad and camped at Jotbathah. They traveled from Jotbathah and camped at Abrana. They traveled from Abrana and camped at Ezion Geber. They traveled from Ezion Geber and camped in the wilderness of Zin, that is Kadesh. They traveled from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor on the edge of the land of Edom. At the Lord's command, the priest Aaron climbed Mount Hor and died there on the first day of the 5th month in the 40th year after the Israelites went out the land of Egypt. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. At the time, the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev in the land of Canaan, heard the Israelites were coming. They traveled from Mount Hor and camped at Zalmunna. They traveled from Zalmunna and camped at Punon. Traveled from Punon and camped at Oboth. They traveled from Oboth and camped at Liabarim at the border of Moab. They traveled from Liam and camped at Dibungad. They traveled from Dibungad and camped at Alman Diblathaim. They traveled from Alman Diblathaim and camped at Abarim range facing Nebu. They traveled from the Abarim range and camped at the plains of Moab by the Jordan and crossed from Jericho. They camped by the Jordan from Beth Jeshimoth to the Acacia Meadow, the plains of Moab. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. Tell the Israelites, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you must drive out the inhabitants of the land before you. Destroy all their stone images and cast images, and demolish all their high places. You are to take possession of the land and settle in it, because I have given you the land to possess. You are to receive the land as an inheritance by lot according to your clans. Increase the inheritance for a large clan and decrease it for a small one. Whatever place the lot indicates for someone will be his. You will receive an inheritance according to your ancestral tribes. But if you don't drive out the inhabitants of the land before you, those you allow to remain will become barbs for your eyes and thorns for your sides. They will harass you in the land where you will live, and what I had planned to do to them, I will do to you. Okay, that is it for the reading for today. We got some questions still, and we will jump straight into them. Question 1: What can we learn from the Israelites' victory over the Midianites about the importance of obedience and faith in God's commands? They did what they were told to do. They didn't bring more people. They didn't bring less. They brought exactly what they were supposed to bring. And not only did God just give them victory, not a single person was killed. Like, that is pretty awesome. And we're going to see some similar stories coming forward, or going forward. Story of, well, especially once we get into like some like judges and stuff. There's some cool stories kind of along similar lines, but like I pointed out in the reading, I think it's cool that they recognize that and they decided to do something about it, to um, try to do something for God, just being gracious for that. Sorry, my eye is like crazy watering, and I don't know why. Question 2: How does the act of remembering past events as highlighted in these chapters help strengthen our faith and trust in God's promises? We've talked about this a good bit on here, but if you are quick to remember how God has already provided for you, then it's going to be easier for you in the moment when you're waiting for God to provide for you, because you're going to remember He's already done it. Like we've talked about too, like faith. Faith in the Bible is not a blind faith. Faith in the Bible is trust built on evidence. So I use the example of an airplane. One of the reasons why I trust an airplane is because I've been on an airplane before. I have a general idea of how airplanes work. I have been on airplanes many times, and I've always landed where I was intended to land, roughly the time I was intended to land, and I've never had any major issues. So I believe if I take an airplane, I'm probably going to go where I want to go. Same thing, right? So we have faith and we believe because of what God has done for us already. Not strictly because, but that remembering how God's already come through will help in the current moment. Question 3: In what ways do you see God guiding you in your own life, and how can we be more attentive to His direction as we navigate our journeys? Um, so for me, there are a few things going on that I think some things more than others. I feel like I've directly seen God's hand in. Um, I will say I typically be careful how I word this. I don't think that you should not pray about things. I think you should pray about things. When you make decisions, you should pray about it before you make the decision. But I think generally speaking, more often than not, you're going to have to use discernment and make the decision that you think is the correct decision. I don't think as a constant rule, you're always going to hear like God like specifically say, go do this, go do this, go do this. Um, you can disagree with me on that. That's fine. It's not a primary issue. It is a secondary issue at best. But I think God also knows if you're being genuine and trying to follow what He wants, and if you are, then He'll take that into account if you do choose the wrong thing. I mean, I think if you are seeking Him in prayer and you're reading the Word on a daily basis, I think you're going to more often than not you're going to pick the right thing. Um, and even if you pick the wrong thing, He can redeem it. So, yeah, that is it for today. Appreciate everyone watching, listening, all that jazz. If you're still on, comment below. Let me know what you thought. This third question actually kind of fits really well. So, a way that you have seen God in your own life, right? Um, something that you've seen God do guiding your own life. Feel free to put that in the comments. If you don't want to put it in the comments, that's fine. If you want to send a message, you can do that. All of our social medias. I try to be as responsive as I can. X is definitely the best way to get in touch. But I try to be as responsive as I can. Instagram is probably the worst. I don't really get on Instagram a whole lot except to post stuff and leave. Um, but yeah, if you want to be in contact, if you want to reach out for something, feel free to go that route. The channel is still small enough that I can respond to most people. So yeah, get in while you still can, and while you can still get an answer relatively easily and quickly. Tomorrow is the end of Numbers. I know everyone is devastated, but we'll be back next year. But tomorrow is going to be the end of Numbers, the last day that we are in the book of Numbers. So you don't want to miss it. I'll see you then. God bless.